All right, so we said we were going to use more electricity, so we're going to actually save a little bit per month on a cost basis that isn't built into the variable cost anyway, because the electric cost would be built into here as well. But we'll save some on the load factor change. To do that, though, we are going to have to expand the amount of load we can take in the plant, which means we have to pay money to have the electric coming out and do that expansion. Which we were going to do in year 3, and now we're going to have to move that up into year 2, it looks like. And so I wanted to just build that in the model as well. I've updated the model a little bit. Can't Alt-Tab there. There we go. I updated the model a little bit and added all the accounts, so I have everything lined out the way I want it now. So if you want to update yours, pause it, and go ahead and do that. But I just added kind of in the order I was going to want it for the bottom. And so for load expansion, again, what it said was we were going to spend $300,000 in year 3. Now we need to move that up to year 2. It says, but now we will need to move that up a year. So we will no longer be spending $300,000 in year 3 like we were going to. We're now going to spend money in year 2 instead. And so actually in year 3 we get a positive $300,000. And instead, we're going to make the negative payment that the cost is going to hit in year 2. So without the project, it would have hit here. Now it's going to hit here. We just have to shift it. And there is a discount factor of 3%. And so we're going to discount this back 1 year, basically, at 3%. And so now we're going to pay $291,000 in year 2. But we no longer have to pay for the expansion in year 3, and so this ends up being our cash flow model. Once you discount it back, it actually ends up being slightly negative, though it will not actually affect the model in any significant way. So shifting, sometimes when you're shifting things, you got to kind of think through, okay, well, those payments that I no longer have to make should be in the model as well if they're due to the model itself. And then I've got another weird one here. So I've got that the technology we're using is projected to fail across a particular distribution. It'll cost us $4.5 million, growing at 2.5%. The failure rate doesn't start being a problem until year 5. At that point, there's a 5% failure rate, and then that failure rate increases by 3.7%. And so basically, we're going to build in a expected value model to price in the risk of this failure. This is where really, if you want to get great at this, you start moving away from this sort of modeling and into more simulation-based modeling, but the outcomes aren't terribly different. To do that, again, I'm going to kind of model it here and then I'll get it out of the way, but there's a 5% failure rate, failure probability. There's a failure probability of 5% in year 5, and that increases by 3.7% each year. The problem with this is, oh gosh, what did I do? I typed something wrong. That plus 3.7%. The problem if you're doing what I'm going to do is a binomial, it either fails or doesn't fail, and you multiply n times p. The cost is n, and p is the probability. If you do that across multiple years, then the sum of the probabilities ends up being your total probability, and the sum here is about 500%. So it will not fail 5+ times in the next 16 years. So instead what you have to do is in each probability, you have to take the probability that it fails, but then subtract out basically the probability that is already failed in the past. And to do that, all you really have to do is multiply by 1 minus the probability that it's already failed. Again, if you want to learn lots of probability theory stuff, I recommend it. It's good to know, but I'm not going to get into it in this video. This isn't the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build an expanding sum formula. So it's going to start with the 5%. So in the first year, it's just going to have a 5% probability. And then as I drag it across, it'll go from H20 to H20 to H20 to I20. So it'll add year 5 and 6. Then it'll add year 5, 6, 7, etc. So this sum will get bigger and bigger. And that's the probability that it has not failed yet. And if you multiply the probability of failure times the probability that it has not failed yet, that's the probability that it will fail in that given year. And what this will do is smooth these down so that the probabilities are a little smaller. And then the total probability of failure, oh, what did I do wrong? H20 plus 3.7. Oh, need parentheses here too. Run H20 plus 3.7. There we go. Because that's the probability of failure in that year, assuming it hasn't already failed. There we go. And so then our total failure probability over the 16-year period from 5 to 20 is now 76%. So that makes more sense. And this is a one-time failure probability model. If they had it built so that if it failed, there was another probability of failure given 4 years after 4 more years, then it gets a little bit more complex, and I'm not going to get into any of that. So we're just going to put it in as there's only one failure. There can only be one failure. And then the failure cost, you model it with it. And the failure cost was $4.5 million, growing at 2.5%. And we can use our power and just take that to the power up here. So $4.5 million in today's dollars is what it said. $4.5 million in today's dollars. So in year 5, if it's grown 2.5% 5 times, then now it's a $5 million cost. And then it'll grow each year. So by the end, year 20, it's going to cost you $7 million to fix a failure like that. And then if you just multiply n times p, binomial either failed or it didn't, that'll tell you what the cost of failure is in that year, basically. And this is going to, again, it won't fail every year, so this is kind of smoothing out the probability, just pricing in the risk of failure. That's going to cost you money. So if you just multiply those together and go like this, so it ends up being about $4.3 million, $4.36 million that gets priced in. All that'll get discounted back, so it'll be actually considerably less than $4 million. But that probability of that failure is getting priced in risk-wise. Okay, so probability is useful. I had that modeled out down here, didn't I? Let me go ahead and overwrite that. So anyway, we can do things probabilistically, and these are expected values of failure along the that distributional curve that was in here. So it gave us a distributional curve for a cumulative function. So anyway, there's that. Once we get to this point, now we're starting to get down to the bottom. So we're getting down to earnings before taxes. Again, when we talk about cash flows, which is what we want to get to before, and then we'll discount once we get there. These are not going to be in the tax portion because if they're being depreciated, if they're depreciable assets, typically they're not going to hit taxes in the year they happen. Although with some new tax law changes, there are things that do. I just don't want to get into that, and I'm doing traditional models. So traditionally, depreciable assets, the assets themselves when you pay for them do not hit your profit and loss statement for the year. So we're going to keep it like that. We can talk about how to modify for other types of tax situations in another class. The earnings before taxes then become, well, how much money did you make? Minus, in this case, plus because they're negatives. Plus, so we sum all these together like that. So you basically take your revenues minus all of your costs, and that will tell you what your earnings before taxes are, right? And then when you have things like savings and stuff in there, those should be positives. They're going to reduce that negative, so don't worry about those. If you built them in right, it's fine. So there's your earnings before taxes. Taxes is really straightforward. So we start, once we have earnings, then we can have taxes. We're going to have negative taxes at first here, so here's our tax rate. And that's fine because we said we were a big company. Again, so this is like small like GE. And if you have losses in one segment, you can offset the taxes in another segment and save on your tax liability. So that should work fine. Just multiply by the tax rate. In the first couple years, we're going to have negative taxes from it, and then after that, they'll be positive. Salvage value. Oh, where did my salvage value go? That probably broke my depreciation. Where was it pointing? How did I break that? Plus W15. Oh no. Did I delete that? Anyway, salvage. We can put that back. At least it's still in the right cell. So our salvage amount is, I don't know how I broke that. Times sum of our costs here. There we go. That's better. Did that fix my depreciation? No, it did not. Because it should be positive, not negative. There we go. Okay, that's better. So then our cash flows are going to be our earnings before taxes minus our taxes, right? So you subtract out your taxes, and when these are taxes you're paying versus tax offsets that you're getting, so that they're going to end up being positive. So you just subtract out your taxes. You also need to remember to bring depreciation back into your cash flow. So I'm going to put minus. You're actually plussing. You're adding the depreciation back, but it's negative, so I'm minusing the negative. Because, again, depreciation is a non-cash expense. You want it in here to calculate your taxes because it does reduce how much you have to pay in taxes. It reduces your EBT, so your tax burden is lower and all that fun stuff. It's kind of the point of depreciation. But here we need to add it back in our cash flow because when we took it out up here, it wasn't actually affecting our cash flow. So you have to add back any non-cash expenses. I know we've talked about this before. And then also add in any salvage as well. That'll only happen in year 20, right? So there's your cash flow. It looks like that. And then the last thing we're going to do is discount everything back and sum it up, right? And so for that, what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the cost of capital, and then we'll sum it up and get the NPV like we've done before. Again, WACC is not always the appropriate discount rate. We've talked about that before. But we're going to use it here, and then we can talk about if we want to risk adjust this in any way or something like that. Because projects should be discounted at their own risk level. But how far into this video are we? Does it tell me? I think we're probably getting close to the 15 minutes, and YouTube for some reason won't let me verify my account and go above 15 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here. And the next one we'll do is we'll calculate that WACC, we'll calculate NPV, we'll calculate PI. That means we'll get all our discounted stuff done. We'll do IRR. We'll do that. We'll learn how to do a more complicated thing that does discounted payback periods, stuff like that. So I'll throw in some bells and whistles, and then if we have time in that video, I'll clean all this up as well, because right now it still looks not great because I've just kind of plugged it in. But we'll do simple things like I'm gonna hit a comma. Oh look, and I'm gonna take all the decimals away. And now everything is like that. But I don't want to do that yet and make it look nice yet because I want it all to fit in here so we can still look at it. So we'll make it look a little bit nicer and things like that. All right, I'll see you in that one.